Well, the start of July may not feel like a time to discuss major financial reports, but that's been one of the political stories in the province this week, and some Saskatchewan communities are already declaring a state of emergency due to drought. Political columnist Murray Mandryk joins us now, along with Jeremy Symes, who covers the legislature for the Canadian Press, our political panel reconvening. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning.
Good morning, Murray.
Good morning.
Jeremy, let's start with you. In the last few days, the government has released its final numbers for 2025. We also saw the Crown reports come out. So what stands out to you from this?
Yeah, for sure. So we ended the 2024-25 fiscal year with a $249 million deficit. So this is better than the $273 million deficit the government initially projected, still in a deficit position. What stands out, though, is the extra amounts of revenue and expenses the government didn't project that they are now bringing in. Spending's up $970 million. That's more in healthcare, higher crop insurance payouts, that sort of thing. But we also made $990 million more dollars in revenue. So that's a lot more in tax revenue, some more in oil and gas. Potash was down. But the big one was $400 million more dollars from this tobacco settlement we got. So the province, there was some litigation with other provinces against the tobacco companies, and we were going to recover this money for the healthcare system. So without that $400 million, it kind of begs, okay, we probably would have been in a worse position. The Crown reports you mentioned, I think what stood out was just how they were done. There was no news conference per day per Crown. That's usually how it's done, where you get one Crown a day. Instead, it was all lumped together in one day, all the Crowns. And so I think that allowed for less scrutiny of the Crowns and how they were doing. An example of this was the Sask Power annual report. They got rid of their emissions reductions targets in there. They used to track that. So we weren't able to ask more of a question about that, get a fulsome answer about that. In terms of the money, though, like the Crowns, they still made $510 million. It's a little less than last year, but they're still making money. And the big money maker was gaming and lotteries, where they got $223 million.
Interesting. So, Murray, what's your takeaway from this? Jeremy mentioned the Crown reports. We covered that. You go in, get SaskTel one day, Sask Energy the next day, and they've done away with that.
I'll deal with that first. It's unconscionable to dump that much information on one day, and they do it for political reasons. They do it because there won't be the proper level of scrutiny for something like SaskTel. And SaskTel is worrisome at this particular point because they're in such a competitive environment right now where their base industry is of landlines and everything else is going the way of elsewhere. And there's competition, obviously, in the cell industry and elsewhere. We need to scrutinize that. We have to have a serious conversation about what's going on in Sask Power as opposed to having a conversation about, maybe we'll keep the coal-fired plants going for X number of years more because that's our only alternative. We have serious investments to make in the nuclear industry as an alternative down the road. But there's no talk of that. And there's the level of smugness from the government saying, we'll just do this this year this way, and by the way, the minister Jeremy Harrison saying, well, maybe next year we'll do it in Meadow Lake. Well, it'd be nice for the Meadow Lake people because maybe they'll get to see their MLA for a day or so because he mostly lives in Regina right now. But that aside, it's just not the way in a province where we are dependent on the Crown corporations to have them all stuffed in one day. It's a disservice to the public. It's a disservice to the Crowns themselves, and it's simply wrong. Quickly, in terms of the budget, you can't have a situation where your budget isn't even being balanced, but in a severe deficit situation that would have been made significantly more severe had we not had a major settlement from the tobacco companies. We can't rely on that to balance the budget. They already have a budget this year going forward, 25-26, that's going to be suffering greatly from what we're seeing right now in terms of drought, in terms of forest fires, obviously the trade war, no contingency fund in place like that. We have serious structural problems that need to be addressed, beginning with crop insurance, that have to be that someone has to take a serious look at right now in terms of how do we rebudget. For whatever reason, I'm not 100% sure why they did it, because government's always in the first budget after an election, try to do the corrective because they got 3 years before they have to get reelected to do this. They chose not to this year. And that's going to be costly in itself because they're that much further behind in the corrective cycle. And everybody kind of remembers what happened in the 2017 budget. I'm kind of wondering in 2026 if we're going to have a similar situation where the corrective budget has to be enforced at some particular time because structurally we can't continue on, particularly with the crop insurance in the way that it is right now with the drought situation.
Yeah, Murray, speaking of that drought situation, Jeremy, you have a story coming out about this year's drought. What can you tell us?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just another really hard year, specifically in southwest Saskatchewan, just speaking with farmers and ranchers there. What kind of stood out is like this is the 9th year in a row for some people down there in this drought. So they're having these conversations about what does a long-term plan look like to address these situations. Also in these conversations, some are talking about packing it in, closing the farm. These are 3 to 4 generation farms, not wanting to proceed because of the drought. It's just too much weighing on them financially, too much stress, and it's something that maybe isn't worth it going forward. They're talking about changing crop insurance as well. They want more changes to that. Murray did mention it. Maybe there's a payment per acre program they could bring in. Maybe there's a program that could help them take the seed off of crops that aren't producing yields and use that seed for next year and not get penalized for doing that. The province they did announce this week a program where those crops that aren't producing yield can be used for animal feed instead, and that won't impact their farmers' crop insurance coverages, but they are still saying more needs to be done there. Like I mentioned, this one guy in Gull Lake had some interesting things to say. It's time to take off the rose-colored glasses about this, kind of think long-term, change our grazing practices, working together to share hay, and maybe using winter crops more differently or in a better way. So it's just that looking at that long-term approach people are thinking now.
And Murray, Jeremy talked about the government changing some policies. So we've talked about the crop insurance and how that affects the government's finances and the budget time. What do you make of what we're seeing increasing droughts year after year, really, and this is impacting the province?
Well, to be clear, the government says crop insurance is self-sustaining right now simply because of farmer contributions and still having a surplus. Problem being with that is the pool gets bigger every year and it gets more costly, and it gets more costly towards subsidizing what can in many ways be described as corporate farms right now. Some of these are family farms, but they're large corporation family businesses right now. So it's not quite the same as it used to be. But listening to what Jeremy had to say, you have a significant amount of sympathy for farms that have been in the business for 100 years and are now facing the reality that climate's changing and that we need that maybe their operations are no longer sustainable under the current format. I think they need to take a serious look at stuff that they're doing right now and look at structural changes. I think it involves a whole shift, and I'm not so sure it's not involving taking a look at sort of money being sent to farm concerns like gravel roads and such, and really reorganizing things in a proper way in rural Saskatchewan. Obviously, that's going to be horribly unpopular. Obviously, the government isn't going to do it because you're cutting right to the base, and the governments don't do that when it means the difference between them being government and not being government. But these are the hard choices that we're looking for that we're going to have to deal with sometime in the future. As I say, you can't be balancing budgets on tobacco payouts or whatnot, and that money should be going to things like mammograms and other because it's one-time expenses. We need to look at the structural nature of our budget right now.
And around this time last week, our friend here, Jeremy, put out a farewell column to readers, and for people that aren't aware, Murray is, just having a well-deserved, I think, retirement. He's been a mentor to you and I know you're a colleague with him at the newspaper and still at the legislature. Any thoughts on Murray saying goodbye?
Yeah, oh my gosh. I'm going to miss Murray so much. I think a lot of us political reporters in Saskatchewan will miss him a lot. Murray comes with a of knowledge, a generation of knowledge in a way that I don't have in the legislature. A lot of young reporters don't have, and we are going to miss just having that person to go to ask for advice. I know there was multiple times. So I worked at the Leader Post before the Canadian Press, and there'd be many times I'd be like, hey, Murray, I need help with this story. Where should I go with this to help me? And he was always there to help me with that. There's other awesome times where Murray has he has really good sources. And so he'd be like, hey, I got this source. It was the Mo tour back in when they were talking about drawing the line or whatever. And so he tipped me off with that. These town halls, and I got to write a story about that. You got to write a column about that, and we kind of double hit it that same day, and that was really cool to still be able to do that kind of stuff. So I will miss that, and I'll just miss just being able to pick Murray's brain just about what's going on, because it's just so valuable, and it is a huge loss in Saskatchewan.
And Murray has been a huge mentor to me, and I echo what Jeremy says. There's many times where I'd walk down to Murray's office and say, hey, what do you think of this? And just bouncing ideas off Murray and using that wealth of knowledge. And Murray would take a stack of newspapers that are on his desk that are, from, 1987. He'd pull out an article, and he'd have that in there. It's probably a fire hazard, but he had all of the knowledge, and that will be missed. And I know there's many different things people had posted on social media last week of all our former colleagues and friends who work all over the country who were saying their thank yous to Murray. And I'll point people to probably the best person to write about Murray was Hallie, his daughter, who wrote a great piece on CTV and begrudgingly got her dad to talk about himself for a little bit. So I'm happy that Hallie got to do that, and she did such a good job. And I want to let our listeners know that Murray's going to continue on the panel, so we're not getting rid of him. He's going to be stick around, so you're stuck with us, Murray, as long as that's okay with you. Murray, just your thoughts on wrapping up a long career here at the newspaper.
I'm sorry, I wasn't really paying attention. What were you guys thinking?
It wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, it would be the first time. I don't know. You guys are obviously too kind. I'm more comfortable when you're insulting me because I just am. It's a job like anybody else's. You don't really think of it in terms of anything other than what you have to do that day. But I've been fortunate enough to do a job where I could be passionate about it, and where I could care about it. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next. I just can't imagine myself sitting on the park bench like a lot of old people ranting about politics, because that's not me. But
you'll have to write about it.
I have to write about it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have to write about it. No, it's exactly me. But that's the neat thing about what we do. We get to do and say things that other people are talking about or other people care about, and we get paid to do it. We get paid to tell stories. We get paid to report on things, and it's a fantastic way to have made a living for a long, long time. And all the BS about how much help I was to you guys. 10,000 of you guys, including you two, that would have done fantastic on your own, because you're smart young guys and are really good at what you do. And I was just there for comic relief. So I thank you for your kind words, but one of the nice things is you sort of, as bad and as tough as it is in this industry right now, you're leaving it in good hands of a lot of really good, capable young people that are doing really some really, really good work. And I think that's kind of rewarding in itself right now. But, at a certain time, you just basically say, you know what, time to sit in the park bench and maybe contemplate that book. So,
Murray, thanks so much, and thank you, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate that, buddy.
That's our political panel, Murray Mandryk and Jeremy Symes, who covers the legislature for the Canadian Press.